Let's talk about a watch that I will never buy. Let's talk about a watch that I really liked, except maybe for the movement. Let's talk about a $37,000 watch. A watch that's going well above retail on the secondary market. A watch that most of us can't afford and very few will ever see in the metal. Let's talk about why more people likely dislike this watch than like it. Let's talk about Patek collectors, future Patek customers, Patek changing. And let's talk about why I was wrong and why Patek may be wrong. Let's talk about the Patek 6007G model variants in yellow, red and blue. You have a 40mm case with a 9.17mm thickness. The lugs are 22mm and a 48.5mm lug to lug. The case is full white gold and you can choose between a yellow, blue or red accented dial with matching carbon fiber style textured strap. You get the caliber 26330 SC, which is an automatic movement with 45 hours of power reserve. You've got a date window, and all of this can be yours for $37,850 if you have them lying around in your house somewhere. It's a steal, actually. What we have here is a carbon fiber embossed pattern strap. The lining is leather. Carbon fiber upper has stitching along the edges that match to the dial color accents, so either red, light blue or yellow. It's not a deployment, but a simple buckle mechanism. The look is sport forward, and I actually think the choice of buckle over deployment is a good one. The strap itself has a quick release mechanism, which I'm thankful for. After all, a gold case is easy to scratch, so any attempt to use a spring bar tool may very well end in tears. The Calatrava line is a weird line when you look at it. You get everything from the classic 6119 with the Clou de Paris bezel, which is the Calatrava I think of when someone says Calatrava. Then there's the 5227G, which is the very definition of a classic plain, no pizzazz dress watch. Then you also have the 5226, which in my mind is a full white gold field watch in a Patek design. The cases do have similarities, as do crowns, lugs and other features, but personally, if you told me they were parts of different lines, I would not argue with you. It's not like a Datejust, which looks like a Datejust no matter which Datejust you choose. This Calatrava has a perfectly round case, a small crown and lugs that flow seamlessly out from under the rounded bezel. The finish is high polish all around. The lugs and case have a modest curvature along the full length of the case with only a small flattening of the lugs towards the lug ends. It has a lot in common with a Calatrava from the 90s, the 5000G, which likely has connections to even earlier models. But the history of Calatrava models and Calatrava design is not my strong suit. So if anybody out there has the full lineage of this case design, then let me know in the comments. Whatever the history, this is a soft and supple case. There's no brutality, there's no aggression, no sharpness. It's just soft and easygoing. You also can't look at these dials without saying sporty. This watch instantly makes me think of racing, race cars, sports and speed. Even without savvy marketing, it is that racing vibe this watch gives off in spades, much like a Tag Heuer or a Breitling Top Time or even a Nomis Autobahn. This is down to the numerals, which are large, visible and thin. They aren't fat bomber pilot numerals, but lean Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, Mille Miglia fonts. They're all white with white gold surrounds. The outer minutes track has these colored yellow, red or blue accents interspersed with white numerals. In the middle ring, again, you have the accents at the hour markers, a seconds hand that is also with the signature color accents. And in the middle, you have this alternating pattern of diagonal stripes, which are clearly there to accentuate and complement the carbon fiber look of the straps. Everything is impeccably done, right down to the black base color, which has a sheen to it that I've only ever seen on a comparable Moser Vanta black dial. It's just deep and rich. The carbon pattern is stamped, which many individuals have taken issue with, expecting rather a hand-finished approach. All in all things considered, I liked the look of this watch. I wasn't a big fan of the movement. The date window had its usual problems, as with so many watches. My gut reaction on the dial, though, was that maybe it was a little bit on the busy side to my personal tastes. But overall, it was stunning. It was, in my opinion, exceptionally finished and sat amazingly on the wrist. I thought the carbon strap and color coordination was a winner. This was a winner. Apparently I was wrong. I was wrong about the movement. Technically, I didn't think it was particularly impressive. 45 hours of power reserve in 2023 is borderline a joke. Yeah, it's got the Geneva seal, but in my opinion, that's more of a marketing tool than anything else. An Omega is going to be more accurate and more robust and have more power reserve. Second, I didn't like that it was an automatic. This is for two reasons. Generally, I want a dressy watch to be manual wind. There's just something old school and antiquated in a good way about a dress watch, especially one from one of the Holy Trinity brands. Second, the rotor is full size, so it gets in the way of actually seeing the movement in its entirety. Finally, though, I thought the movement itself was boring. I just had a glass-hued Panamatic Luna in the hand, a watch that costs roughly a quarter of the Patek. In the glass-hued, you get an off-center skeletonized mini rotor. You get multiple intricate finishing techniques where the pièce de résistance is the double swan neck regulator built on a balance bridge. It's a fraction of the price, it's a stunner of a movement. Up close, maybe the finishing of the glass-hued can't stand up to the technique of the Patek, but overall, in my eyes, it just looked better. And apparently I was wrong, because Patek movements are a total rabbit hole. This movement is a descendant of the 324 from the 2000s, which in turn is a descendant of the 315, which goes back to the 80s, and so on. Now, to me, that means absolutely nothing. What the engine was in a Mercedes from 1984 and how it relates to the engines they have today has little meaning to me. But to the Patek aficionado, this movement is a continuation of a decades-long journey of refinement and improvement. We're talking about the newest moving having a stop seconds function, something we take for granted in even the most basic Seiko movements. But in this movement, it's heralded as groundmaking. For a Patek lover, this means something completely different. My eyes, though, they didn't see that. They just saw a relatively bog-standard automatic movement with no bells and whistles. Really well finished, but still not blowing me away. I was also apparently wrong about the case, strap and dial. I liked this watch looks. It wasn't my style, but I could still appreciate it and thought it was great. I felt it was absolutely stunningly put together. What we had was a sporty, youthful design with a dial, although chock-a-block with details, was balanced and harmonious. The splashes of color in red or yellow or blue added for some visual variety, and as opposed to the 6007A from a couple of years back, made this watch much more of a statement piece. A lot like a Tissot Sideral, that this was a fun and inspiring watch. To the aficionados, the finishing was wrong. The carbon center pattern is a stamped pattern. I've seen this watch in the metal. It looks immaculate, at least to me. But to many, the blood boiled over when they heard about this. Why? Because Patek is expected to hand finish their dials. For a Holy Trinity watchmaker, stamping is almost sacrilegious. No amount of rational argument about the quality will dissuade the incarnated Patek watch fan. Rolex can stamp, machine engrave and whatnot. Patek can't. It's un-Patek. It comes across as lazy, low class, in the same way that some wine lovers have strong emotional reactions to top winemakers using plastic corks in their bottles. God forbid. The implementation of color and the carbon strap was also wrong. These design choices are apparently unbecoming of venerable old, and I emphasize old Patek. Carbon is for kids. Color is for kids. This style, this implementation is just not what Patek to them is. It's gaudy, it's flashy, it's everything that Patek isn't. I even saw a particularly funny comment on Reddit calling it a callous watch. And I do sort of see their point. Even the super complicated, majorly adorned grand complications are oddly restrained in a way that this case and dial isn't. And this sits so badly with many deep Patek aficionados. So I was wrong. I realized it when reading an article in Hodinkee, which initially hit me as one of the silliest statements I had read in regards to a watch. The Hodinkee author wrote, "It's a daily wearer for the type of person who wants a Patek, someone who's ready for a Calatrava, but maybe they discovered watches years ago via something like a Hamilton khaki field." I found it funny that someone would say that you go in and buy a Hamilton khaki field for $675 and then a couple of years later you're ready for a $37,000 Patek. No, that's not how a Patek buyer gets into their first Patek. I don't buy roller skates as my first means of transportation and then upgrade to a Rolls Royce. Then again, unwittingly, the Hodinkee author had a point. And the key was the Patek buyer. I'm not a Patek buyer. The heritage long-term Patek aficionado is most likely to dislike this watch and inform me that I'm wrong. They aren't against daring designs, but this watch to them was likely a step too far. The implementation of, let's say, a more efficient production technique for the dial and the overall design language with color, carbon and whatnot is just not what they associate with true Patek. This watch is, after all, in the Calatrava line with watches that are far more middle of the road, far more conventional, far more safe. Now, is this a watch design-wise insane like some stuff, from Zenith or Hublot? Absolutely not. It's not crazy like an AP Spider-Man either. But for Patek, this watch is a significant departure from what you normally see, and that, to the core buyer, is not acceptable. But why are Patek building this kind of watch if the core buyer doesn't like it? Well, because Patek thinks they have to change. Patek thinks they need to offer something new, something different to entice a new, younger type of Patek buyer. Vacheron thought the same thing, and to them the solution was to offer an affordably priced watch in their lineup, the 56. AP, who have a slightly broader problem, also think that the 1159 is at least a partial answer to appealing to a new, younger type of buyer. I think they're wrong, and I think Patek is wrong. Think of MTV. MTV has always been focused on youth and trend. When music videos died, they had to change. Supreme is a clothing brand which exists entirely on the premise of delivering on trend, on immediate popularity. They need to change in line with trends to remain relevant. Trend as a concept is inherently unstable. Newness as a concept is inherently unstable. What is new today is old tomorrow. So brands like MTV and Supreme and the like have to constantly move and adapt at an unrelenting pace. By basing their brand on trendiness, they are inherently unstable, so they have to change constantly. They live and die on being relevant right now. But this doesn't apply to Rolex or Vacheron or Patek. Why not? Because they're not built on the premise of being cool or trendy or relevant. Rolex, Vacheron, Patek are all built on different premises, none of them being trendiness or relevance. They are built on the basis of quality, desirability, exclusivity. The attributes that define Patek are to a large extent timeless. Desirability, exclusivity, and quality are far more stable concepts than trend, popularity, and newness. It doesn't mean that a brand like Patek can be complacent, but there's a huge difference between keeping up with the times and changing with the times. To me, the 6007G, and I think to hardcore Patek fans, is an attempt to change with the times, to try and enter in some limited way into a zone of relevance, to be cool, to be trendy. And it's not necessary. You can't just churn out the same identical product year after year, but innovating, refining, and adjusting, like Rolex does every year, is a very different exercise than trying to change, especially when change is necessary, and even more so when the change comes across as pandering. Actually, I think I have to rephrase that. Think of the distance between whatever Patek is and the taste of the new or young non-Patek consumer. It has a distance. Patek, AP, and Rolls-Royce will die if the distance between those 2 points increases. They have to keep up, but they don't need to close the distance. As long as the generational distance remains constant, they're fine. The 6007G, I think, is an attempt to close the distance, which is unnecessary. Just keep up and you'll be fine. I actually think the original 6007A in steel without the color, with a more standard fabric strap, was far more keeping up with the times without changing with the times. The 5226G, which to me is an uber high-end tool watch, does the same. It's more modern than the other Calatravas, but it's still restrained and refined. The 6007G, however, with the carbon strap and the colored accents, those minute details, are what take it a step too far. It's not a huge misstep, but it is a misstep. Grey market prices to the contrary, of course. Which brings us full circle. I said at the very beginning that I would not buy this watch, and I won't. I like it, it looks good, and no, I can't afford it, but that's not my point. The reason I won't buy this watch is because I'm not a Patek buyer yet. When I do buy a Patek someday, I'm not buying this one. I'm buying a classic Calatrava, or a 6007A, or a 5226, or a World Time. Patek thinks they need to make this kind of watch to be relevant to a new kind of buyer. In my eyes, they're wrong. Patek is Patek, and as long as they stay true to that, they will always be coveted. Just ask Ed Sheeran. He's young, he buys Patek, and what does he buy? Classic Patek. And so will everybody else for years to come. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe. Cheers.